For almost 30 years, war and violence has reigned in Afghanistan, destroying a beautiful country and ravaging its local people. The Afghan story dominated international airwaves in the early and mid-1980s. The departure of the Soviets made Afghanistan once again invisible to the world, though. And it was the tragic events of September 11th that brought much-needed attention and concern to the plight of the Afghan people. Media reports focused especially on the situation of the Afghan women who had suffered greatly under the Taliban regime, further deprived of basic rights and opportunities. Unfortunately, the situation of Afghan women was co-opted to justify a war on terror, which has in fact further deepened rather than alleviated the suffering of the Afghan people. The departure of the Taliban and the commitments of the international community to Afghanistan presented an unprecedented opportunity to bring peace, security, and improved livelihood to the Afghan population. When I worked there in 2003, there was a great sense of optimism and promise. 6 years after the departure of the Taliban, despite some gains and successes, however, the promises made remain largely unfulfilled, and the country has not made the projected gains it should have. Despite billions of dollars in international donation and the presence of hundreds of aid agencies and thousands of international workers, the vast majority of the Afghan population continues to live without access to basic needs such as food, water, shelter, healthcare, education, and other services. While the situation has improved in Kabul, the vast majority of the country remains stricken by poverty and insecurity. Of course, we can't expect to change things overnight after 30 years of violence and conflict, but 6 years is a long time to note little progress on the development front. And unless things are turned around, the situation can deteriorate even further. The war on terror has deepened militarism, which is accompanied by increased violence, devastation, and suffering. The international community is spending 10 times more on militarism in Afghanistan than on social programs, development, and reconstruction projects that would alleviate the challenge of daily life in Afghanistan, while the deteriorating security situation has made development and reconstruction increasingly challenging, if not impossible, particularly in the southern region. A very interesting report was released just yesterday by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. And very briefly, for this report, 1,000 Afghans were interviewed. And what was found was very much what we have been speaking about for a while now, which is that the deteriorating security situation and rising violence, along with government corruption and misguided efforts by outside forces, are really causing increasing unease in Afghanistan. And although the economic situation has somewhat improved and some rights for women have been established, there's a growing frustration not only over the security situation, which is deteriorating, but also the lack of basic services such as electricity. Afghanistan today is the 4th poorest country in the world, with 60 to 80% of its population living under $1 a day. As far as the women are concerned, statistics suggest that 80% continue to be illiterate, 68% of girls between 7 and 13 continue to not be enrolled in school, and 54% of girls are married before they reach 18, many of them forced into marriages with much older men for financial or customary reasons. Most shocking is the maternal mortality rate that has not improved significantly in 6 years. And today, Afghanistan has the second highest maternal mortality rate in the world, with an appalling 15,000 women dying each year from preventable pregnancy-related complications. I believe the situation of women in Afghanistan is exacerbated by the ongoing militarism. Military presence has an adverse effect on women who bear the brunt of the suffering in times of conflict and violence. Militarism over the years has exacerbated a culture of violence, negatively impacted the security situation of women, and in Afghanistan it has also had several other remarkable effects. One of these being that it has caused women's progressive absence and exclusion from public life, and therefore their inability to participate fully in the peace-building and reconstruction efforts. Another important point is that it has helped to deepen the culture of violence that has led to a significant increase in violence against women, both in the public and private spheres, with reports of a marked increase in domestic violence, rape, and other forms of violence against women by armed groups, forced and early marriage, honor killings, and a rise in sexual trafficking and prostitution of women, and a especially disturbing trend in suicide attempts amongst women, usually through self-immolation. Canada's military engagement is seeing the blurring of lines between military and humanitarian work. While the government and military establishment inform us that it's an inevitable consequence of the new type of wars that we're fighting, the reality is that the military should not be engaging, in humanitarian aid efforts, because it compromises the military mission while negatively impacting the ability of aid organizations to do what they do best, which is the provision of basic needs to local populations in time of crisis. So efforts at winning hearts and minds are actually increasing human suffering and exacerbating poverty, hunger, and ultimately strengthening the insurgency. For lack of time, I will only briefly point to three things that I think are important discussion points. First, it's inappropriate and indeed impossible to undertake peace building while engaged in a violent military operation. And the military simply cannot do aid well when it is trained for something completely different. The blurring of lines between military action and humanitarianism undermines the effectiveness of the work of aid agencies by undermining one of the basic principles of aid delivery, neutrality and impartiality. This compromises the safety and security of aid workers, and we've seen a noticeable increase in attacks on foreign aid workers and their Afghan colleagues who are seen to be collaborating with the outsiders. Unfortunately, it also compromises the safety of those who are the recipients of the aid. A second important point is that regarding militarization of aid is its inability to engage local actors and contribute to sustainable peace and development. When local actors are not engaged in the development and implementation of projects, the project is vulnerable to failure and does not increase local capacity, contribute to local economies, nor make for a sustainable project. Finally, and most importantly, militarization of aid is bad for women. In Afghanistan, military presence has resulted in further exclusion of women from public space and has had the effect of contributing to rigid interpretations of Islam and its accompanying restrictions on women's human rights, including their right to movement. Furthermore, when aid is delivered by soldiers, it is less likely to reach the most vulnerable, the women and the children. This vulnerability has led aid organizations to ensure full participation of women in the delivery of aid in their communities and ensured improved distribution. The military has not started to do that and is not capable of doing that. It is impossible for the military to do the same, especially in Afghanistan, where cultural custom calls for the separation of women from all non-related men. In essence, the militarization of aid model does not account for the cultural and religious context it is operating within in Afghanistan. For Canada to make a lasting impact in Afghanistan, it must consider a few important points. On the security front, in order to improve the security situation in Afghanistan, we need to deepen our understanding of the root causes of the deteriorating situation and to seek to address these. I don't believe we've done a good job of this so far. We continue to categorize Taliban as unitary, homogeneous entity with little appreciation or understanding of their history, their makeup, their objection, and their longevity. Not all Taliban are created equal. There are moderates, extremists, ideologically motivated Talibs, and poor farmers who fight in order to have a regular salary to feed their children once we've gone in and destroyed their farms. We cannot impact the insurgency unless we appreciate these realities and undermine the roots of the insurgency, which includes meddling by Pakistan and other external factors, the growing poverty and desperation, and underlying grievances. I hope that the international community, and Canada especially, lives up to our commitments to the Afghan people, who have suffered already through 3 decades of violence. I hope that they can look forward to a brighter future for their children, and that the lessons we learn as an international community can serve to assist us in working more effectively in alleviating suffering throughout the whole world. And the lesson must include the fundamental truth that the advancement of women and equal rights and opportunities for men and women is one of the prerequisites of sustainable peace and must therefore be supported in every way. Thank you very much.